She was
I've
working
got
herself
it.
to death.
Keep moving.
The thought
It's so
arrived like
heavy.
frost
We're
creeping
almost there.
and inevitable,
Thank you.
settling into the spaces between her heartbeats. Rosalind Ashford knew it the way she knew winter, by the ache in her bones, by the way her breath came shorter each morning, by the particular silence that follows when the body has nothing left to give. The field stretched before her, a sheet of frozen earth that refused to yield. Gray sky pressed down like a hand on her shoulders. The hoe struck the ground once, twice, three times, each impact reverberating up her arms until her teeth rattled. Ice had claimed the soil weeks ago, turning what should have been workable land into something hard as stone, unforgiving as memory. Her hands, wrapped in strips of cloth that had once been her good Sunday dress, had gone numb an hour past. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt her fingers as separate things. They were just extensions of the hoe, now frozen to the wood, bound by cold and stubbornness in equal measure. Behind her, the farmhouse leaned like a drunk against the wind. Its windows were dark, its chimney barely smoked. One side of the roof had given way during the last storm, and she'd patched it with whatever she could find, boards from the broken wagon tin, from the rusted water trough. It held, but only just. Everything held, but only just. Hollow Ridge, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The winter that wouldn't end. They said February was supposed to bring relief. They said March would thaw the roads. But they didn't know this winter. This winter had teeth. This winter had come early and stayed late, like a guest who'd forgotten how to leave, settling deeper into the land with each passing week. Rosalind straightened, one hand pressed to her lower back, where the pain lived, now constant and gnawing. 25 years old. Some days she felt twice that. Some days she felt ancient. The sun hung low and pale, offering light but no warmth. Shadows stretched long across the field, reaching toward her like fingers. She'd learned not to look at them too long. Shadows had a way of taking shape when you were this tired, when you'd been alone this long. 18 months. 18 months since Daniel died. The thought arrived unbidden, the way it always did. She pushed it down, buried it beneath the rhythm of work. Strike, lift, strike, lift. Don't think, don't remember, don't stop. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering. Remembering meant the long nights when the house felt too big and too small at the same time, when the wind carried sounds that might have been voices, when she lay awake wondering if she'd made different choices, if she'd seen the signs earlier, if she could have strike, lift, strike, lift. The wind picked up, cutting through her coat like it wasn't there. Her coat. Daniel's old work jacket, 3 sizes too large, the sleeves rolled up so many times the cuffs were thick as rope. It smelled like dust and sweat and something else she couldn't name. Something that might have been him once. Might have been the man she thought she married. The man who left her nothing but debts and a foreclosure notice nailed to the door. She'd found it 3 months after the funeral. A piece of paper that changed everything. $800 owed to Jeremiah Kane. Payment due in full 90 days from the date of Daniel's death, or the land would be forfeit. $800 might as well have been $8 million. She'd gone to see Kane, of course, rode into town with her head high and her hands shaking, determined to negotiate, to plead, to find some way forward. But Jeremiah Kane was not a man who negotiated. He was tall and thin, with eyes the color of winter ice and a smile that never reached them. He'd looked at her the way men look at livestock they're considering purchasing. "Your husband signed the papers," he'd said, tapping the contract with one long finger. "His mark is here, legal and binding. You've got until the spring thaw to pay, or I take the land." "I'm working," she'd said. "I can pay you back. Just give me time." Time, he'd repeated, as if the word were foreign. "Time is the one thing I'm giving you, Mrs. Ashford. 90 days. Use them well." That was 63 days ago. 27 days left. 27 days to find $800 or lose everything. She'd tried. God, she'd tried. Took in sewing from the women in town. Sold everything that wasn't nailed down: Daniel's tools, his saddle, his pocket watch. Even the good china her mother had given her. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The arithmetic was simple and cruel. Even if she sold every possession, worked every hour of every day, until the deadline, she'd barely reach 200. Maybe 3 if she was lucky. If luck was something that still existed in her world. The hoe slipped from her grip. She stared at it lying in the snow, this simple tool that had become an extension of her will to survive. Her hands trembled. Not from cold, from something deeper. Something that lived in the marrow. Exhaustion, the kind that sleep couldn't fix. She bent to retrieve the hoe, but her knees buckled. For one terrible moment, she thought she might not get back up. thought she might just stay there kneeling in the frozen field until the snow covered her over and the winter had its way. But she rose, because that's what you did. You rose. She always rose. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of gray and darker gray. No reds, no golds, just the slow death of light. She should go inside, start a fire, eat something, should. But the field wasn't finished. And if the field wasn't finished, then neither was she. Strike, strike, lift. The rhythm was hypnotic, meditative, the only prayer she knew anymore. That's when she heard it. Footsteps, not the crunch of boots in snow, something quieter, steadier, like someone walking who knew exactly where they were going, who'd walked this path 1,000 times before, even though there was no path here, just virgin snow stretching in all directions. Rosalind turned, Ho gripped tight. He stood at the edge of the field between her and the dying light. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long, dark coat that moved in the wind like something alive. No horse, no wagon, just him standing there as if he'd materialized from the air itself. Her first thought, stranger. Her second thought, danger. Out here, they were the same thing. Who are you? Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Good. Never show weakness. Never show fear. He didn't answer right away. Just stood there watching her with eyes she couldn't quite make out in the fading light. Then he moved, and it was strange how he moved, not walking exactly, but gliding each step purposeful and quiet, closing the distance between them with an ease that made her grip the hoe tighter. When he was close enough for her to see his face, she stopped breathing. Handsome didn't cover it. He was beautiful in a way that seemed wrong, somehow too perfect, too carved, like something made by an artist who'd never seen a real man before. Dark hair fell across his forehead, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, but might remember given time. And his eyes, dark, so dark they were almost black. But when the last light caught them, there was something else, something that shifted and moved like smoke. My name is Nathaniel, he said. His voice was low, quiet, but it carried. Nathaniel Thorne, I'm looking for work, shelter. I can offer labor in exchange for a place to stay. Rosalind laughed. It came out harsh, brittle. Do I look like I'm running a boarding house? You look like you could use help. I don't need help. Everyone needs help. Not from strangers. He nodded slowly as if he'd expected this answer, as if he'd had this conversation before many times in many places. I'm a craftsman, and he said, carpentry, masonry, metalwork. I see your roof needs repair. Your barn is listing. The fence line is down on the western edge. How do you know about my fence line? I walk past it. In the dark. I see well in the dark. Something about the way he said it made her skin prickle. Not quite a threat, not quite a promise, just a statement of fact that felt like both. I don't have money to pay you, she said. I'm not asking for money, just shelter. A roof, a corner. I don't eat much. Everyone eats. Not everyone. The wind rose between them, carrying snow that stung her cheeks. She should send him away. Every instinct screamed it. Strange man appearing from nowhere, offering help she desperately needed but couldn't afford to trust. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like understanding, like he knew what it meant to be this tired, this alone, this close to breaking. One night, she heard herself say, the barn, not the house. You stay in the barn, you're gone at first light. Understood. She turned back to the field, but her hands were shaking now. She could feel him standing there watching, waiting. The barn's that way, she said, not looking at him. There's hay in the loft. Help yourself. She heard him move away, those two quiet footsteps receding. Only when he was gone did she let out the breath she'd been holding. What had she done? The field still wasn't finished, but darkness was falling fast now, and her hands had gone beyond numb. She drove the hoe into the ground one last time, leaving it standing like a grave marker, and walked toward the house. The barn door was already closed. No light showed through the cracks. She told herself it was fine. Told herself she'd lock her door, keep the rifle close. Told herself he'd be gone by morning, and this would just be another strange moment in a life that had become nothing but strange moments strung together. Inside the house, she lit the lamp with fingers that barely worked. The fire had gone out hours ago. She should rebuild it, but she was so tired. So tired. She sat in Daniel's chair, her chair now, she supposed, and stared at the empty hearth. 18 months and she still saw him there sometimes, sitting across from her, smiling that smile that had once made her heart race. Before she learned what that smile meant, what it hid. The bruises had faded. The fear hadn't. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd check the barn, make sure he was gone. Make sure she was alone again. Alone was safer. Alone couldn't hurt you. But when she finally fell asleep in the chair, cold and hungry, and wearing all her clothes, she dreamed of dark eyes and quiet footsteps, and a voice that said, everyone needs help, even when you've forgotten how to ask. Morning came gray and cold. Rosalind woke in the chair, neck stiff, body aching. The lamp had burned out. The house was freezing. She could see her breath. She stood slowly, joints protesting, and walked to the window. The barn stood where it always stood, but something was different. It took her a moment to see it. Then her breath caught. The western wall, the one that had been leaning dangerously for months, ready to collapse with the next strong wind. The wall she'd been meaning to fix but never had the strength, the materials, the time. It was straight, not just straight, rebuilt. New boards perfectly fitted, reinforced beams, work that should have taken days, maybe weeks. Done in a single night. Her hand went to her throat, pulse hammering. No one worked that fast. No one could work that fast. Unless. She grabbed the rifle from above the mantel and ran outside, not bothering with her coat. The cold hit her like a fist, but she barely felt it. Her feet carried her across the snow, toward the barn, toward answers she wasn't sure she wanted. The door stood open. Inside, everything was neat, organized. Tools she hadn't seen in months were cleaned and hanging on the wall. The hay bales were stacked precisely. The floor had been swept. And standing in the center, examining a broken harness, was Nathaniel. He looked up when she entered. No surprise on his face, like he'd been expecting her. "You rebuilt the wall," she said. Not a question, an accusation. "Yes." "That's impossible." "Difficult," he corrected. "Not impossible. That's a week's work. I work quickly. No one works that quickly." He set down the harness, movements careful and precise. "I told you, I don't need much sleep. I work through the night. In the dark. I see well in the dark." There it was again, that statement that felt like confession and warning. She raised the rifle, not pointing it at him, not yet, but making it clear. "Who are you really?" "I told you, Nathaniel Thorne." That's a name, not an answer. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, some calculation she couldn't read. "I'm someone who needs a place to stay," he said finally. "Someone who can help you with your work. That's all you need to know." "No, that's not all I need to know. Men don't appear from nowhere. They don't rebuild barns in one night. They don't." She stopped because she just noticed something else. The floor where he stood, no footprints in the dust, no tracks in the scattered hay, like he weighed nothing, like he wasn't really there at all. The rifle trembled in her hands. "What are you?" she whispered. Nathaniel's expression softened. Not quite pity, not quite sadness, something in between. "Someone who won't harm you," he said. "That's a promise I can keep." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." They stared at each other across the barn, hunter and hunted, though which was which she couldn't say. Finally, Rosalind lowered the rifle. "You should go," she said, voice steady even though nothing inside her was steady. "I appreciate the work, but I can't. I don't." "Let me stay one more day," he said quietly. "Just one. Your roof has a leak on the eastern side. It'll get worse when the next storm comes. Let me fix that. Then I'll go." "Why? Why what? Why do you want to help me?" He looked away, then out through the barn door toward the frozen fields beyond. "Because I know what it's like," he said finally, "to be alone, to work until you can't feel anything anymore. To tell yourself you don't need anyone because needing people is what breaks you in the end." The words hit her like stones. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "Don't I?" And the terrible thing was he did. Somehow this stranger knew, saw her in a way no one had seen her in 18 months, maybe longer. "One day," she heard herself say, "you fix the roof, then you leave." "Deal." He picked up his tools and walked past her toward the house. She stood in the barn, rifle heavy in her hands, wondering what kind of fool makes the same mistake twice. Trusting strange men, letting them in. But as she watched him climb onto the roof with an ease that seemed impossible, as she heard the steady rhythm of his hammer against wood, something inside her loosened. Just a fraction. Just enough to breathe. The day passed in a blur of work. Nathaniel on the roof, Rosalind in the field. She tried not to watch him. Failed. He moved like water, like wind, like something not quite bound by the same rules that govern normal men. Never stumbled, never slipped. Just steady, purposeful motion, each action flowing into the next. By midday, the roof was done. She knew because he appeared at the edge of the field, tools in hand, watching her work. "It's finished," he said. She drove the hoe into the ground and wiped sweat from her forehead. Even in the cold, she was sweating. That's what exhaustion did, made your body work against itself. "Good, then you can let me help you." "What?" "With the field. You'll kill yourself working like this." "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're barely standing." Anger flashed hot and sudden. "You don't know what I am. You don't know what I can." Her vision swam, the world tilted. She felt herself falling before she realized she'd lost her balance. Felt the ground rushing up, ready to meet her. But it never did. Because Nathaniel was there, arms catching her, holding her up. And she should have been afraid of how fast he moved, how he'd crossed 20 feet in the span of a heartbeat. Should have been afraid of the inhuman strength in his grip, the way he held her like she weighed nothing. But all she felt was relief. Relief that someone finally had caught her before she broke. "Let me carry that load," he said softly. And just like that, the fight went out of her. "I don't need charity," she whispered. "This isn't charity." "Then what is it?" He looked down at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "It's someone who understands," he said, "offering help to someone who forgot how to ask." She pulled away, stood on her own 2 feet even though they shook. Nathaniel stepped back, giving her space. "One row," she said finally. "You can help with one row." He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just picked up the hoe and walked to the next row over, and began to work. She watched for a minute, maybe two. Watched the way he moved with the same fluid grace he brought to everything. Watched the frozen earth yield to him when it had fought her all morning. Watched and wondered what she'd invited into her life. But the wondering didn't stop her from picking up her own hoe and working alongside him. They worked until sunset, side by side, not speaking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of shared purpose, of two people who understood that sometimes work was prayer, that sometimes the only thing you could do was put one foot in front of the other and keep moving. When the light finally failed, they'd finished 3 rows. 3 rows that would have taken her a week alone. Rosalind stood in the gathering dark, looking at what they'd accomplished, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous thing, hope. "Thank you," she said quietly. Nathaniel nodded, started to walk toward the barn. "Wait," she called. He turned. You can stay. For dinner. It's not much, but I don't need to eat. Everyone needs to eat." "Not everyone," he said again. And there it was, that same strange phrase, that same hint at something other. But she was too tired to push, too tired to demand answers. "Then come inside anyway," she said. "Sit by the fire. Warm yourself." "I don't get cold." "Everyone gets cold." This time the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "All right," he said. They walked to the house together, footsteps crunching in the snow. Hers heavy, solid, leaving clear prints. His barely there, like he was walking on top of the snow instead of through it. Inside, she built a fire while he sat in Daniel's chair. Her chair. The chair that was supposed to be for no one anymore. But watching him sit there, long legs stretched out, eyes reflecting the flames, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the house was breathing again. She made soup from the last of the dried beans and some potatoes from the cellar. Not much, but warm, filling. Nathaniel accepted a bowl with a quiet thank you, but she noticed he didn't eat. Just held it, letting the steam rise as if the warmth was enough. "You're not eating," she said. "I told you, I don't need much." "You told me a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." He looked at her, then really looked, and she saw something flicker across his face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Everything? Nothing? I don't know." "Start with one question." She thought about it, about all the questions circling in her mind like ravens, settled on the simplest one. "Why are you here?" "I told you, Taro." "No, not the story about looking for work. The real reason. Why Hollow Ridge? Why now? Why me?" Nathaniel set down the bowl, leaned back, stared into the fire like it held answers. "I was passing through," he said finally. "Saw your farm from the road. Saw you working, lone, in the middle of winter. And I thought I recognized something." "Recognized what?" "Stubbornness. The kind that keeps you alive when everything else says you should quit. That's not special. Everyone out here is stubborn. No, most people out here are surviving. You're fighting. There's a difference." She didn't know what to say to that. Wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an accusation. I lost someone, Nathaniel continued, voice quiet. A long time ago, someone I loved. And after she died, I told myself I didn't need anyone, that needing people was weakness, that I could carry everything alone. He looked at her. I was wrong. What changed your mind? Time. Enough of it that I can't remember when I started. Enough of it to understand that carrying everything alone isn't strength. It's just another way of dying. The words hit her like a physical thing. She had to look away. Your husband, Nathaniel said gently. Daniel, how did he die or accident? The lie came automatically. Practiced. Fell from the loft. Broke his neck. I'm sorry. Don't be. She stopped. Bit down on the words that wanted to spill out. The truth she'd never told anyone. But Nathaniel just waited, patient, like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't a good man, she said finally. The admission cost her, made her throat tight. Everyone they thought we were happy, thought he was a good husband. But he wasn't. He hurt me, not always, not every day, but enough that I learned to walk quiet, to keep my head down, to tell myself it would get better. Did it? No, it got worse, and then he died, and everyone felt sorry for me. The poor widow, the grieving wife. But I wasn't grieving. I was relieved. She laughed bitter. What kind of person is relieved when their husband dies? The kind who survived him, Nathaniel said quietly. She looked up surprised. You're not a bad person for being relieved, he continued. You're just honest. Most people can't even manage that. Tears burned in her eyes. She blinked them back hard. The debt, she said, changing the subject before she broke. The debt he left, $800 to Jeremiah Kane. I have 27 days to pay it or I lose everything. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Jeremiah Kane. You know him. I know of him. Nathaniel stopped, chose his words carefully. He's not a man to be trusted. I know that, but the contract is legal. Daniel signed it. And now I have to pay it or I lose the farm, the house, everything. What will you do? I don't know. Work, hope, pray. She laughed without humor. None of which will get me $800 in 27 days. Nathaniel stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at the dark. I can help you, he said. You already have. The barn, the roof, the field. No, I mean with the debt, with Kane. She stood too, heart suddenly pounding. You have $800. No, but I have other resources, other ways. What does that mean? He turned to face her, and in the firelight his eyes weren't quite black anymore. They were red, deep glowing red. Rosalind stumbled backward, hit the table. The rifle was across the room, too far, too far. Don't be afraid, Nathaniel said, but his voice sounded different now, deeper, older. What are you? She whispered. He moved closer. She wanted to run, couldn't, frozen in place by fear and something else, something that looked almost like inevitability. I told you, he said softly, I'm someone who can help. You're not human. No. What are you? He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the red glow fading from his eyes, bleeding back to black. I'm a vampire, he said. The word hung in the air between them. Impossible. Absurd. Except she'd seen the red eyes, seen him work through the night without rest, seen him move faster than any human could move, seen him leave no footprints, need no food, feel no cold. A vampire. You're going to kill me, she said, voice steady even though she was shaking inside. No. You're going to drink my blood. No. Then what do you want? Nathaniel reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, placed one hand on the table between them. I want to help you, he said. I want to stay here, work this land with you, protect you from men like Cain. I want to remember what it's like to be useful, to have purpose, to feel human again. You're a vampire. I am. Vampires kill people. Some do, I don't. How do I know that you don't? You have to trust me. She laughed, high and sharp. Trust you. Trust a vampire. Trust someone who sees you, who understands what you're carrying, who wants to help you carry it. He stepped closer. Rosalind, look at me. She did, met those dark eyes searching for the red glow for the monster. But all she saw was a man, tired, lonely, desperate for connection. Just like her. I've been alive a long time, Nathaniel said quietly. 700 years. I've seen empires rise and fall, seen wars that killed millions, seen plagues that wiped out entire cities. And in all that time, I've learned one thing. The monsters aren't always the ones with fangs. Sometimes they're the ones who smile while they hurt you. The ones who make you think it's your fault when they strike. He was talking about Daniel. Had to be. I won't hurt you, he said. That's a promise, a blood oath if you want it. I'll stay until the spring thaw. I'll help you save this farm. And when it's done, when you're safe, I'll leave. You'll never see me again. Why? Because you helped me. I didn't do anything. You let me in. You gave me shelter. You treated me like a person, not a monster. Do you know how rare that is? She didn't. Couldn't imagine what 700 years of that kind of loneliness would feel like. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't have to. You just have to decide. Do you want my help, yes or no? Rosalind, he looked at him, this impossible man, this vampire, this stranger who'd appeared from nowhere and rebuilt her barn and worked her fields and sat in her dead husband's chair like he belonged there. She should say no, should run, should grab the rifle and shoot until it was empty, then run some more. But she was so tired of being alone, of carrying everything, of fighting every battle by herself, and he'd promised. A blood oath, whatever that meant. One condition, she said, name it. You tell me the truth. Always. No more secrets. No more half answers. If I ask you something, you tell me the truth. Nathaniel considered this, nodded slowly. Deal. And you don't feed on me, ever. I wouldn't even if you gave permission. Then where do you hunt animals? I don't need much. Once a week, maybe twice. I go out at night. You'll never see it. She wanted to be horrified, wanted to feel disgust, but all she felt was relief, because he was staying, because she wasn't alone anymore. Okay, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Okay, you can stay. Something in his expression softened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep your promise. I will. They stood there in the firelight, human and vampire, two creatures who'd learned to survive alone, learning now what it might mean to survive together. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled. And for the first time in 18 months, Rosalind Ashford felt something that wasn't fear or exhaustion or despair. She felt hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. But hope nonetheless. The days that followed had a rhythm to them, not the grinding, relentless rhythm of survival that Rosalind had known for 18 months. This was different. This was the rhythm of two people learning to move in the same space without colliding, learning to share the burden that had been crushing her alone. Nathaniel rose before dawn, always before dawn. She'd wake to find him already working, splitting wood, mending, fence clearing snow from the pathways. He moved through the dark like it was daylight, like shadows were just another kind of air. She stopped asking how he could see, stopped questioning the impossible things, because the impossible things were keeping her alive. They worked the fields together when the sun was high enough to pretend it warmth. She with her hoe, he with his. The frozen earth still fought them, but less now, as if it sensed something had changed, as if even the land understood that she wasn't alone anymore. He didn't talk much, neither did she, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of two people who'd learned that sometimes words just get in the way of truth. 3 days after she learned what he was, the nightmare started. She'd wake gasping, sheets tangled, Daniel's voice still echoing in her ears. Not the Daniel who died, the Daniel who lived, who smiled with his fists, who said he loved her right before he made her bleed, the first time she woke screaming. Nathaniel was there before she could catch her breath, standing in her doorway, not crossing the threshold, eyes wide with concern. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, couldn't speak yet, throat too tight. Nightmare. A nod. He stood there uncertain, neither in nor out, and she realized he was waiting for permission. Even in crisis, even when she was clearly distressed, he wouldn't enter her room without being asked. You can come in, she whispered. He crossed the threshold slowly, sat in the chair by the window, keeping distance between them. Didn't ask what the nightmare was about. Didn't offer empty comfort, just sat there, present, solid. Tell me something, she said after her breathing steadied. What do you want to know? Anything, just talk. I need to hear something that isn't his voice. Nathaniel looked out the window at the star-filled sky. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured, like he was reading from a book of old memories. I was born in 1178, he said, in a village that doesn't exist anymore. My father was a blacksmith. My mother died when I was young. I don't remember her face anymore. Isn't that strange, 700 years and I can't remember my own mother's face? Rosalind pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Listened. I married young. Her name was Catherine. She was everything. Bright and fierce and so alive. We had 3 good years. Then the plague came. His voice didn't change, but something in his posture tightened. She got sick. Everyone got sick. The village priest said it was God's judgment. I said if God was judging anyone, it should be me. What happened? A stranger came through, offered me a choice. I could let her die or I could become what he was. Accept his blood, his curse, and I'd have the power to save her. He laughed soft and bitter. I took it. Of course I took it. What man wouldn't? Did it work? No, the transformation took 3 days. She died on the second night. I woke with power. I didn't want immortality I didn't ask for, and nothing to use it on. Everyone I loved was dead or dying. I'm sorry. Don't be. That was 700 years ago. I've had time to make peace with it. He turned to look at her. But I learned something that night. Power doesn't save people. Love doesn't save people. Sometimes all you can do is witness. Be there, even if it doesn't change anything. Is that why you're here to witness? Maybe, or maybe I'm here because I finally learned that witnessing is enough. That you don't have to save someone to matter to them. She thought about that. About Daniel, who'd promised to save her from a hard life and instead made it harder. About all the men who confused control with care. He used to tell me he was protecting me, she said quietly. Daniel. When he'd grab my arm too hard or push me or worse, he'd say it was because he loved me. Because I needed to learn. Needed to be better. That's not love. I know that now, but then I thought maybe it was. Maybe that's what love looked like. Rough and painful and something you survived rather than enjoyed. Love isn't something you survive, Nathaniel said. It's something you choose, every day. And it should make you stronger, not smaller. She looked at him, this vampire who'd lived 7 centuries, who'd seen empires fall and a plague sweep continents, who sat in her bedroom at 3 in the morning talking about love like it was something he still believed in. Did you love anyone else? She asked. After Catherine? No, I tried. God knows I tried, but I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk caring that much again. And now he met her eyes, held them. Now I'm starting to remember why I wanted to in the first place. Something shifted in the air between them. Not tension, not quite. More like recognition, like two people looking at each other and seeing something that had always been there but never acknowledged. Rosalind broke the gaze first, looked down at her hands. You should sleep, Nathaniel said, standing. Dawn's still a few hours away. Will you stay just in the chair until I fall asleep? Of course, she lay back down, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Watched him settle into the chair, long legs stretched out, eyes reflecting the moonlight. Nathaniel, yes, thank you for not being like him. You don't have to thank me for basic decency, Rosalind. But she did, because basic decency had become so rare in her life that when it appeared, it felt like a miracle. She fell asleep watching him watch the stars, and this time there were no nightmares. The next morning, she woke to find him gone, and breakfast waiting on the table. Bread, fresh bread. She hadn't had fresh bread in months. There was a note beside it written in careful script. Rode to town before dawn. Back by noon. Don't work yourself to death while I'm gone. She smiled despite herself, ate the bread slowly, savoring each bite. Then she went to work in the fields because work was what she knew, and knowing Nathaniel would be back made the work feel less like punishment and more like purpose. He returned exactly at noon as promised, but he wasn't alone. A woman rode beside him on a gray mare. Elderly, maybe 70, with silver hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that had seen everything and judged most of it wanting. Rosalind set down her hoe tension, immediately rising. Visitors meant questions. Questions meant lies or uncomfortable truths. Rosalind, Nathaniel said, dismounting. This is Constance Merrick, your neighbor to the east. The woman climbed down from her horse with surprising grace, studied Rosalind with sharp, assessing eyes. So you're the widow Ashford, Constance said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Yes, ma'am. And he's living with you now. She gestured at Nathaniel. He's working for me, in exchange for shelter. Mm-hmm. Constance's gaze moved between them, calculating. You know what people will say. I know what people always say about widows who don't perform grief to their satisfaction. Rosalind replied sharper than she intended. Constance's eyebrows rose. Then she smiled. Actually smiled. Good, you've got spine. You'll need it. She turned to Nathaniel. You, vampire, I need to speak with you privately. Rosalind's heart stopped. How did you? Please, I've lived 73 years on the frontier. You think I don't know what moves like shadow and doesn't leave footprints? Constance shook her head. I'm old girl, not blind. Nathaniel's expression remained neutral. What do you want to discuss? Disha, not here. Walk with me. She started toward the tree line without waiting for agreement. Nathaniel glanced at Rosalind, a question in his eyes. Go, she said. I'll be here. He nodded and followed. Rosalind stood in the field watching them disappear into the trees, her mind racing. If Constance knew, who else knew? How long before the whole territory was talking about the widow harboring a monster? They were gone for an hour. When they returned, Constance's expression was softer. Nathaniel's was unreadable. I'll be watching, Constance said, climbing back onto her horse. Both of you, but not to judge. To help. If you need anything, supplies backup, someone to verify your story, you send for me. Why would you help us? Rosalind asked. Constance looked down at her, something almost like fondness in those sharp eyes. Because the world already has enough people tearing each other apart. Maybe it's time some of us tried holding each other together instead. She gathered her reins. Besides, dead things can be more alive than living things. I've seen it before. She rode away, leaving Rosalind and Nathaniel standing in confused silence. What did she say to you? Rosalind asked. That she lost her husband to a vampire 40 years ago. That she spent 20 years hunting them. That she killed 17 before she realized she was just killing to avoid grief. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. She said I reminded her of the last one she spared. A vampire who'd forgotten how to hunt and was just trying to tend a garden in peace. What happened to him? He walked into the sun a decade later, left her a note saying he'd finally found peace. Nathaniel looked at Rosalind. She told me not to waste the second chance you're giving me. I'm not giving you a second chance. I'm just letting you stay. It's the same thing. Maybe it was. She didn't know anymore. That night, Nathaniel taught her how to defend herself. Not with weapons, with her body. How to break a grip. How to strike fast and hard and run. How to make herself small or large depending on what the situation needed. You won't always have a rifle, he said, demonstrating a wrist lock. You won't always have time to reach for it, but you'll always have yourself. She practiced on him, trying to break free from his hold. He let her, pulling his strength back so she could learn the movements. Harder, he said. I won't break. I don't want to hurt you. You can't hurt me. I'm already dead, remember. She stomped on his instep, drove her elbow back into his ribs, twisted out of his grip. He released her immediately, stepping back with approval. Better, again. They practiced until her muscles screamed, until she could barely lift her arms. And then they practiced more, because he was right. She wouldn't always have a rifle, but she'd always have herself. Later, as they sat by the fire, hands wrapped around cups of tea, his untouched as always, she asked the question that had been building. Why did you really come here, Nathaniel, to Hollow Ridge? To my farm? Why me? He was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. Outside wind tested the repaired roof and found it strong. I told you I was looking for something, he said finally. What? A reason. 700 years is a long time to exist without purpose. I've been a king, a warrior, a wanderer. I've ruled territories and abandoned them, built empires and watched them crumble. And through all of it, I kept thinking, there has to be more than this, more than power and blood in endless nights. Did you find it? He looked at her, really looked. I think I might be. Her breath caught. The firelight painted his face in golden shadow, making him look almost human. Almost. I'm not your purpose, she said softly. No, but you reminded me what purpose feels like. What it means to work for something that matters. To protect something worth protecting. I don't need protecting. I know, that's why you're worth it. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken things pressing down like snow on a roof, testing the beams, seeing what could hold. I'm afraid, Rosalind admitted, of me, of this, of feeling anything for someone again. Daniel taught me that caring is just another word for giving someone the power to destroy you. Daniel was wrong. Was he? Look what happened to you. You cared about Catherine. It destroyed you. No, losing her destroyed me. Caring about her made me human. There's a difference. Is there? Nathaniel set down his cup, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Rosalind, look at me. She did. Caring about someone doesn't give them power over you. It gives you power, the power to choose, to fight, to survive impossible things because they matter more than your fear. His voice was intense, certain. Daniel didn't love you. He controlled you. Those aren't the same thing. Don't let his sickness poison what love actually means. Tears burned in her eyes. She blinked them back hard. How do I know, she whispered. How do I know this is different? You don't. You have to choose to trust it. Trust me. Trust yourself. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. Took her hand. His skin was cool but not cold. Solid. Real. I won't hurt you. I won't control you. And if you want me to leave tomorrow, I will. Your choice. Always your choice. She looked down at their joined hands. Human and vampire, mortal and immortal. Living and dead. Except he didn't feel dead. He felt more alive than anyone she'd ever known. Stay, she said. I will. Teach me more. How to fight, how to survive, how to be strong. You're already strong. Then teach me how to be strong without being alone. Something in his expression softened. That I can do. They sat together by the fire until it burned low, hands clasped, and for the first time since Daniel died, maybe for the first time since Daniel lived, Rosalind felt safe. 3 days later, everything changed. Nathaniel had gone out to hunt. She knew the routine now. He'd slip away after dark, be back before dawn, and they wouldn't speak of it. An arrangement that worked because neither of them examined it too closely. She was in the barn mucking stalls by lamplight when she heard the horses. Multiple horses, coming fast. Rosalind grabbed the pitchfork and moved to the door. Through the gap, she could see them. 6 riders, maybe 7, circling the property like wolves. Hunters, not local men. These were professionals. Long coats, weapons strapped everywhere, faces hard with purpose. And leading them was Jeremiah Kane. Her blood turned to ice. She stepped out, pitchfork gripped tight, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Mr. Kane, she said, voice steady. It's late for a visit. Jeremiah dismounted, smiled that smile that never touched his eyes. But Rosalind saw something else there now, something she hadn't noticed before. A hollowness, a grief that had calcified into cruelty. Mrs. Ashford, forgive the intrusion, but I have business with your employee. He's not here. We'll wait. You'll leave. This is private property. Property you don't own. Not yet. 20 days left on your contract, Mrs. Ashford. 20 days until this land is mine, which means I have every right to be here. The other riders dismounted, spread out, surrounding. What do you want? Rosalind demanded. One of the hunters stepped forward. Older man, scarred face, carrying what looked like a crossbow loaded with silver bolts. The vampire, he said, flat, professional. We know he's here. We know what he is, and we have a contract to bring him in. I don't know what you're talking about. Jeremiah laughed. Please, don't insult us both. Nathaniel Thorne, vampire, former king of the Western Territories, worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. You're insane. Am I? Then explain how your barn got rebuilt in one night, how your fields got plowed when you were too exhausted to stand, how a stranger appears from nowhere and doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, doesn't leave footprints. She said nothing. Because what could she say, smart girl, Jeremiah said. Now, where is he? Gone, left yesterday, said he was moving on. Liar. Believe what you want. He's not here. The scarred hunter moved closer, sniffing the air like an animal. She's lying. I can smell him. Old blood, death. He's been here recently. Search the property, Jeremiah ordered. You have no right. I have every right. This land is forfeit in 20 days. Everything on it is mine, including whatever monsters you're harboring. The hunters fanned out. Rosalind stood helpless, pitchfork, useless against professional vampire killers, watching them tear through her barn, her house, her life. They found his things in the barn. A bedroll, a few books, nothing damning. But the scarred hunter found something else. A trap. Silver chains attached to pressure plates buried in the snow. Old technology. Vampire hunting equipment. He's been here recently, the hunter said. This is fresh, set within the last few hours. Jeremiah's eyes gleamed. He's hunting. He'll be back. No, Rosalind said. No, you can't. Can't what? Can't capture a dangerous creature. Can't protect innocent people. He's not dangerous. He's not hurting anyone. He's a vampire. They're all dangerous. Jeremiah stepped closer, and for a moment his mask slipped. Rosalind saw raw pain there, old wounds that had never healed. You think he cares about you. You think this is kindness. He's using you, feeding off you one way or another. They all do. They take and take until there's nothing left. There was something personal in his voice, something broken. You don't know anything about him, Rosalind said. I know enough. I know vampires. I've been hunting them for 30 years, and Nathaniel Thorne is one of the most dangerous ever created. He grabbed her arm, hard. Where is he? She wrenched free, or tried to. His grip was iron. Let her go. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the shadows themselves. Nathaniel materialized between her and Jeremiah. One moment empty air. The next solid vampire eyes blazing red fangs bared. The hunters reacted instantly. Crossbows raised. Silver bolts aimed. Don't, Nathaniel said. Voice cold. Ancient. This wasn't the man who'd sat by her fire and talked about lost love. This was the vampire king. You know what I am. You know what I can do. Leave. Now. Can't do that, the scarred hunter said. We have a contract. I don't care about your contract. You should. It's worth a fortune. Your blood, your power delivered to the highest bidder. Trafficking ring out of San Francisco pays premium for vampire royalty. Rosalind's stomach dropped. Trafficking, you're not killing him. You're selling him. Jeremiah shrugged. Dead vampire is worth nothing. Living vampire, especially a king, is worth everything. You're monsters, she breathed. No, Mrs. Ashford. We're businessmen. Nathaniel moved. Fast. Inhumanly fast. He took down 2 hunters before they could fire. Moved like water through their formation, breaking weapons, scattering them. But there were too many, and they were prepared. One of them threw something, a vial, that shattered at Nathaniel's feet. Smoke erupted thick and acrid, and Nathaniel stumbled, coughing. Vervain gas, the scarred hunter said. Oldest trick in the book. Silver chains flew, wrapped around Nathaniel's arms, his throat. He roared, flesh burning where the metal touched, but the chains held. More chains, more smoke. They swarmed him like ants on a beetle, professional and efficient. Rosalind screamed, ran forward. Somebody grabbed her, Jeremiah pulling her back. Watch, he hissed in her ear. Watch what happens to things that don't know their place. Nathaniel was on his knees now, chains everywhere, blood running from burns on his skin, but his eyes found hers across the chaos. Run, he mouthed. She shook her head. Run. But she didn't run, couldn't run. Instead, she did something else. She grabbed the knife from her belt, the one Nathaniel had taught her to carry always, and drove it backward into Jeremiah's thigh. He screamed, released her. She ran not away but toward the barn, toward the thing she'd noticed earlier when they were searching. The thing they'd overlooked. Lamp oil. 3 full barrels stored for winter. She grabbed one, rolled it toward the clustered hunters, and hurled her lamp at it. The explosion was smaller than she'd hoped, but enough. Fire erupted, scattering the hunters, creating chaos. Opportunity. Nathaniel surged up, chains still burning him, and tore through the nearest hunter. Not killing, just incapacitating. Breaking bones, creating escape routes. Go! Rosalind screamed at him. Go now! But he didn't go toward the trees, toward freedom. He came toward her, grabbed her hand with his burning chained one. They ran together into the night, into the snow fire, and shouting behind them, blood trailing red across white ground. They ran until her lungs burned, until she couldn't run anymore. Collapsed together in a ravine 1/2 mile from the farm, gasping, bleeding alive. Nathaniel was in bad shape. The silver chains had burned deep. She could see muscle bone, wounds that should have killed a human. We have to get these off, she said, hands shaking. Silver, can't touch them. Then I will. She unwrapped the chains slowly, carefully, even though touching them made her skin blister. Even though every link seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. When they were finally off, Nathaniel collapsed backward, breathing hard. You should have run, he said. You should have too. I can't, not anymore. Why not? He looked at her, eyes fading from red back to black. Because you're here. 700 years. 700 years of solitude. And now he couldn't run because of her. The weight of that realization nearly crushed her. You need blood, she said, to heal. I'll hunt later, when I can move. You won't make it that long, those wounds. She looked at the burns already starting to fester in ways that seemed wrong even for vampire injuries. Nathaniel, you need blood now. I won't take yours. I'm offering. No. Yes. She pulled out the knife, the same knife she'd used to stab Jeremiah, pressed it to her wrist. You carried my burden. Now I carry yours. Rosalind, she cut, quick, deep enough to matter. Blood welled up dark against pale skin. Nathaniel stared at it, hunger and horror warring in his expression. Please, she whispered, let me help you. He moved slowly, took her wrist with trembling hands, brought it to his mouth. The first touch of his lips against her skin sent shock through her entire body. Not pain, something else. Something that felt like recognition. He drank, careful, controlled, taking only what he needed, and as he drank, she felt it. The bond forming, blood to blood, life to death, human to vampire. Trust made physical. When he pulled away, his wounds were already healing, color returning to his skin. Thank you, he whispered. She wrapped her wrist with torn fabric. Watched the vampire who'd just drunk her blood look at her like she'd given him salvation instead of survival. We can't go back, she said. They'll be waiting. I know. Where do we go? I don't know. They sat in the snow, bleeding and hunted, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then Nathaniel laughed, soft, disbelieving. What? Rosalind asked. 700 years. I've survived wars, plagues, revolutions, and I'm going to die in a ravine in Wyoming because I couldn't leave you. You're not going to die. How do you know? Because I won't let you. She took his hand, squeezed. We survived this together, or not at all. He looked at their joined hands, hers human and warm, his vampire and cool. Together, he repeated, together. The word hung in the frozen air like a promise, like an oath, like the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. Above them, stars wheeled through an indifferent sky. Below them, hunters searched with torches and hate. But in the ravine, two impossible things sat side by side. A widow who'd learned to trust again, and a vampire who'd learned to live. The night was long and cold, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. They couldn't stay in the ravine. Dawn was coming, and with it the certainty of discovery. The hunters would search methodically, professionally, the way men search when there's money at the end of the hunt. And Jeremiah Kane was bleeding, wounded, humiliated. Men like that didn't forgive. They retaliated. Nathaniel's wounds had closed, but the silver burns left marks, scars on flesh that shouldn't scar. Evidence of how close he'd come to capture, to being sold like livestock to the highest bidder. Rosalind's wrist throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage, her blood in his veins now, his survival dependent on her sacrifice. The intimacy of it was almost unbearable. There's a place, Nathaniel said quietly, breaking the silence. 2 days north, abandoned mining camp. No one goes there anymore. We can hide, plan. And then, I don't know, honesty. He'd promised her honesty, but honesty didn't always come with solutions. They moved through the pre-dawn dark, Nathaniel leading, Rosalind following. Her feet were numb, her body was exhausted, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting the reality of what they'd lost. Her farm, her home, the land she'd worked herself to death trying to keep, gone. All of it gone. The mining camp appeared like a ghost town carved into the mountainside. Collapsed structures, rotted wood, the skeletal remains of human ambition defeated by nature and time. But there was one building still intact. A foreman's cabin built into the rock itself, protected from the elements by stone walls, and a roof that hadn't yet surrendered to gravity. Inside, it smelled of abandonment and mice. But it was shelter, and shelter was survival. Nathaniel built a fire while Rosalind collapsed onto a bench that might have once been furniture. Her hands were shaking. Reaction, probably. The human body's delayed response to crisis. You should sleep, Nathaniel said. I can't. You need to. I can't, she repeated, and her voice broke on the second word. He was beside her in an instant, not touching, just present. Tell me, he said softly, and it all came spilling out. The fear, the grief, the crushing weight of having worked so hard, fought so long, only to lose everything in one night. I failed, she whispered. Daniel left me that land, that debt, and I couldn't keep it. I tried. I worked until I couldn't stand, until my hands bled, and it wasn't enough. It's never enough. Rosalind, he won. Don't you see Daniel, Jeremiah, all of them? They won because I'm exactly where they wanted me. Broken, homeless, nothing. You're not nothing. What am I then? Offering, free, standing here instead of in chains. That's not nothing. She laughed, bitter and broken. Free, I have nothing. No home, no land, no future. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of prison. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside wind moved through dead trees. When Catherine died, he said finally, I thought my life was over. I'd become a monster for nothing. Damned myself for a woman who died anyway. And for 200 years I believed that. Believed I'd failed, that nothing I did mattered because I couldn't save the one person who counted. He looked at her firelight painting shadows across his ageless face. But I was wrong. Catherine wasn't my purpose. She was part of my story, but not all of it. And losing her didn't make my life meaningless. It just meant I had to find new meaning, new purpose. He reached out, stopped short of touching her hand. You're not defined by that land, Rosalind. You're defined by what you do next. What if I don't know what comes next? Then we figure it out. Together. Together. That word again, the word that was starting to feel like an anchor instead of a burden. She leaned against him, too tired to maintain distance. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that, watching the fire while dawn broke gray and cold outside. Sleep came eventually. Exhaustion demanded it. Rosalind woke to find Nathaniel gone, and panic rising in her throat. But then she heard movement outside, saw him through the broken window, standing in the weak sunlight, face turned toward the pale sun. He was testing himself. She realized it with a jolt. Vampires burned in sunlight. Everyone knew that. But Nathaniel stood there, coat open, skin exposed as rays of winter sun touched his face. Nothing happened. No burning, no smoke, just a vampire standing in daylight like it was the most natural thing in the world. She stepped outside. He turned and saw her watching. Old vampire myth, he said. We burn in direct sunlight, but that's summer sun, equatorial sun, winter sun in Wyoming. He shrugged, uncomfortable, like standing too close to a fire, but not fatal. How many other myths are wrong? Most of them. We don't sleep in coffins. We can enter homes without invitation if we have to. Crosses don't work unless the person wielding them has genuine faith, and even then it's just uncomfortable. He smiled slightly. Hollywood has a lot to answer for. Can you die? The smile faded. Yes, silver through the heart, beheading, fire, starvation if it goes long enough. Or he stopped. Or what? Or choice. We can choose to let go, stop feeding, stop fighting, just fade. Have you thought about it every day for 700 years? He looked at her. Until recently. The weight of that admission settled between them like snow. Nathaniel, she said carefully, what happens when this is over, when we're safe, when the hunters move on, when Jeremiah gives up? I don't know. You could leave, go somewhere they'd never find you. Europe, Asia, anywhere. I could, but I don't want to. Why not? He crossed to her, slowly giving her time to retreat. She didn't. Because for 700 years I've been existing. Moving from place to place, century to century, never staying long enough to matter. Never letting anyone close enough to hurt me. He stopped in front of her, and then I met a woman who was working herself to death in a frozen field, who had every reason to give up, but didn't, who looked at a vampire and saw a person instead of a monster. Nathaniel, I'm not good at this, at feelings, at being human. I've forgotten how, but you make me remember, and I don't want to lose that. Don't want to lose you. Her breath caught. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're strong when you think you're breaking. I know you're kind when kindness has only hurt you. I know you fight when fighting seems impossible. His hand came up, hovered near her cheek. I know that in 700 years I've never met anyone like you. I'm ordinary. You're extraordinary. I'm human, mortal. I'll age, die. You'll still be here exactly as you are now, and I'll be dust. I know, and that doesn't bother you. It terrifies me. His voice was raw, honest, but not as much as the thought of never knowing you at all. Rosalind closed her eyes, felt tears burning behind her lids. I can't, she whispered. I can't love someone who'll watch me die, who'll outlive me by centuries. That's not fair to either of us. Life isn't fair. Love isn't fair, but it's real, and it's here. And we can either run from it or what? His hand finally made contact, palm against her cheek, cool skin against warm. Or we choose it anyway. She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked. This vampire, this king, this man who'd forgotten how to be human and was relearning it through sheer stubborn will. I'm afraid, she said, so am I. What if it's not enough? What if I can't? He kissed her, soft, gentle. Nothing like Daniel's kisses, which had always tasted like ownership and control. This tasted like question, like invitation, like please not demand. She kissed him back, and in that kiss something shifted, something fundamental, like a river changing course, like winter becoming spring, like death remembering how to live. When they broke apart, both were shaking. There's something I need to tell you, Nathaniel said. What? There's a way, a ritual, ancient magic older than I am. I can, I can give up my immortality. Rosalind's heart stuttered. What? I can become human again. Mortal. We could, we could have a life, a real life. Grow old together. Hope flared bright and painful. Is that possible? Yes, but there's a cost. What cost? The power doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere to someone. I have to transfer it. Give it to another person who becomes vampire in my place. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. That's not a solution. That's just damning someone else. I know. So we're back where we started. Unless, he trailed off, unless what? Unless the person receiving the power chooses it, wants it, sees it as salvation instead of curse. Who would want that? Nathaniel's expression darkened. Someone who's already damned. Someone who sees vampirism as redemption instead of punishment. Jeremiah, she breathed. He's been hunting vampires for 30 years. He knows what they are, what they can do. And he's selling them, which means he sees value in vampire power, not just threat. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. What if we offered him the one thing he really wants? Not money, not captive vampires, but power itself. You want to make Jeremiah Kane a vampire? I want to give him a choice. The same choice I never got. Accept his power or we walk away and he gets nothing. He'll never agree. He might, if we frame it right, if we show him what he's really hunting, what he's really wanting. It was insane, impossible, but so was everything else in her life right now. How do we even find him? She asked. We don't. He finds us. What? Nathaniel smiled grimly. He's hunting me. Has been for months, probably. That's why he was in Hollow Ridge. Why he set up that debt with your husband. He was waiting for me to appear, setting a trap. How did he know you'd come? Because I've done this before. Found isolated farms, broken people, offered help. It's my pattern, my weakness. And Jeremiah's smart enough to see patterns. So we're bait. We've always been bait. The truth of that settled heavy. They spent 2 days preparing. Nathaniel taught her the ritual's requirements, the words, the sacrifice, the transfer of power from one being to another. It was complex, dangerous. If anything went wrong, both Nathaniel and the recipient could die. True death, final death. But if it worked, Nathaniel would be human, mortal. They would have 50 years, maybe 60 if they were lucky. Not forever, but enough. On the third day, the hunters came. Rosalind saw them first, torches in the distance moving up the mountain trail. Methodical, patient. They're here, she said. Nathaniel nodded. He'd been expecting this, planning for it. You know what to do, yes. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we go down fighting together. That word again, their anchor, their promise. The hunters surrounded the cabin. 8 of them this time, more than before, taking no chances. Jeremiah dismounted first, limping from where Rosalind had stabbed him. Rage and satisfaction warred on his face. Nathaniel Thorne, he called, come out. We can do this easy or hard. The cabin door opened. Nathaniel stood in the doorway. No weapons, no defense, just a vampire standing in winter light. I have a proposition, he said. Jeremiah laughed. I don't negotiate with corpses. You will with this one. Why would I? Because I'm offering you what you really want. I want you in chains, sold, rich. No, you want what I have, power, immortality, the ability to hunt forever, to never age, to never die. Nathaniel stepped forward. I'm offering you vampirism, true vampirism, not captured, not controlled, given freely. The hunters shifted uncertain. Jeremiah's expression flickered. You're insane. Maybe, but you're tempted. I can see it. Why would you give me that? Because I'm tired. 700 years is long enough. I want to be human again. To die like humans die. To have the life I gave up chasing. He glanced back at the cabin, at Rosalind watching from the window. And you want what I'm leaving behind. I hunt vampires. I don't become them. Don't you? You've spent 30 years chasing us, studying us, profiting from us. You know more about vampires than most vampires know about themselves. Nathaniel's smile was sharp. You're already half in love with what we are. I'm just offering to make it official. Jeremiah's hand moved to his knife. but he didn't draw it. "What's the catch?" he asked. "No catch. You accept the power. I become human. We both get what we want. And her," Jeremiah gestured toward the cabin, "stays with me, lives her life. You leave her alone, forever. That's the deal. That's the deal." Silence stretched. Wind moved through dead trees. The hunters watched their leader waiting for direction. "Why should I trust you?" Jeremiah asked. "Because I'm telling you the truth. Something you've probably forgotten exists." Nathaniel's voice gentled slightly. "You lost someone. That's why you hunt. That's why you're so good at it. Someone you loved became vampire, and it destroyed you." Jeremiah flinched. "You don't know anything about me. I know grief. I know what it looks like when someone spends decades running from pain instead of facing it." Nathaniel stepped closer. "Who was it? Wife, child, sibling?" "My son." The words came out broken. "My son was turned. I had to kill him before he killed me. And you've been hunting ever since, trying to kill the thing that took him, trying to make sense of senseless death." "Yes." "Then accept this. Accept the power. Understand what he became. Live it. And maybe finally you can forgive him. Forgive yourself." Tears tracked down Jeremiah's weathered face. He looked old suddenly, brittle. "How does it work?" he whispered. Nathaniel explained. "The ritual, the blood exchange, the transfer of power from king to subject, immortality from one vessel to another. It would hurt. Transformation always hurt. But it would work. And you'll just let me go. After everything I've done." "Yes." "Why?" "Because revenge is just another kind of prison. And I've been imprisoned long enough." Jeremiah looked at his hunters, at the weapons, at the chains meant for a vampire king. Then he looked at his hands. Old hands, scarred hands, hands that had killed dozens of vampires but never brought his son back. "Do it," he said. The ritual took place at midnight. Rosalind watched from the cabin doorway as Nathaniel cut his wrists, let ancient blood flow into a cup carved from bone. Watched as Jeremiah drank, face twisting in disgust, and something else. Something like hunger. The words Nathaniel spoke were older than English, older than Latin, a language that had died when Rome was young. Power flowed between them, visible, tangible, like light, like smoke, like something that existed between substance and shadow. Jeremiah screamed, his body convulsed, bones breaking, reforming, humanity dying, vampirism being born. It took 3 minutes, 3 minutes of agony that felt like hours. When it was over, Jeremiah Kane stood transformed, younger, stronger, eyes glowing red in the darkness. A vampire. And Nathaniel collapsed. Rosalind ran to him, caught him before he hit the ground. His skin was warm, actually warm. His heart was beating. "It worked," he gasped. "God, it worked." The hunters backed away from their transformed leader, some in horror, some in awe. Jeremiah looked at his hands, flexed fingers that could now crush stone, felt power singing in veins that no longer carried mortal blood. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Given you a choice," Nathaniel said. "Same as I never got. What you do with it is up to you." Jeremiah looked at Rosalind, at Nathaniel, at the life they were building from ruins and impossible choices. "Go," he said finally. "Take her, live your mortal life. I'll figure out mine. The hunters will follow me or leave. Either way, they're not your problem anymore." Jeremiah's new red eyes met Nathaniel's mortal ones. "Thank you, I think, for this curse, this gift, this second chance. Use it well." "I'll try 'em back." The hunters dispersed, some following Jeremiah, some fleeing, some standing frozen, unable to process what they'd witnessed. But Rosalind and Nathaniel didn't wait to see the outcome. They walked away from the mining camp into the winter darkness, leaving behind vampire kings and hunters and everything that had defined them. Walking towards something new, something human, something mortal and precious and temporary. Spring came late that year, but when it came in a rush. Snow melting, streams running, green things pushing through dead earth, reaching for sun. Rosalind and Nathaniel had traveled south away from Wyoming, away from memories. Found a small valley in Colorado where land was cheap and questions were rare. Built a cabin together. Not large, but solid. Planted crops. Tended animals. Learned the rhythm of seasons and sunlight in work that ended when the sun went down. Nathaniel aged rapidly at first, the body catching up with centuries of frozen time. Within 6 months, he looked 50. Within a year, 60. It should have been frightening. It wasn't. Because Rosalind aged too. lines deepening, hair silvering, the natural, beautiful progression of a life being lived. They worked side by side, not in desperation this time, in partnership, in choice. Constance visited once, riding in on her gray mare, eyebrows raised at Nathaniel's transformation. "Well," she said, "that's new." "It is," Nathaniel agreed. "Happy." He looked at Rosalind working in the garden, humming softly to herself, looked at the cabin they'd built, the life they'd chosen. "Yes," he said, "I think I am." Constance smiled. "Good. Dead things being alive, living things being dead. It's all a mess anyway. Might as well choose the mess that makes you happy." She rode away, leaving them to their impossible ordinary life. Years passed. Nathaniel's dark hair turned white, his strong back bent, his sure hands grew gnarled. Rosalind's strength faded, her quick steps slowed, her bright eyes dimmed, but they aged together, side by side, carrying each other's burdens when the load became too heavy. On their 25th spring together, Nathaniel planted a tree, oak, strong, long-lived. "Why?" Rosalind asked. She was 50 now, though some days she felt older. He looked nearly 80, though his true age defied measurement. "Because it will outlive us," he said simply, "and I want there to be something, some proof that we were here, that this mattered." She took his hand, arthritic fingers intertwining. "It did matter. I know, but I want the world to know too." They stood beneath the young oak, two people who'd been vampire and widow hunter and hunted impossible and real, who'd chosen each other against all logic, all reason, all odds. "I love you," Nathaniel said. "I love you too. Do you regret it, giving up your farm, running, choosing this life?" She thought about Daniel's farm, about the debt, about the woman she'd been working herself to death in frozen fields. "No," she said. "That land was Daniel's dream. This," she gestured at their cabin, their garden, their oak tree. "This is ours. We don't have forever. No, but we have enough. Enough. Such a small word for such a profound thing." They lived 15 more years after that. 40 years total since the ritual. 40 years of mornings and evenings, of planting and harvest, of aging and loving and being together. Nathaniel went first, peacefully, in his sleep, heart simply deciding it had beaten enough times. Rosalind buried him beneath the oak tree they'd planted together, placed a stone with his name, sat beside the grave until sunset, hand pressed to earth that held the man who'd taught her that love wasn't about lasting forever. It was about choosing this moment, this person, this burden, for however long you have. She followed him 3 months later, also peacefully, also in sleep. The neighbors found her in the garden basket of vegetables, still in her hand, face peaceful, like she'd just decided it was time to rest. They buried her beside him, 2 stones beneath the oak. Nathaniel Thorne, 1178 to 1918. He learned to live. Rosalind Ashford, 1853 to 1918. She taught him how. The cabin stood empty for years. Eventually it collapsed, wood returning to earth, nails rusting, memory fading. But the oak tree remained, grew, thrived, its roots deep in soil that held two bodies that had once been vampire and widow hunter and hunted impossible and real. And every spring it bloomed, proof that dead things could live, that living things could choose death, that love wasn't measured in forever but in moments, in burdens shared, in choices made, in hands held through winter darkness, knowing spring was coming, knowing spring would fade, knowing it didn't matter, because right now in this moment there was warmth, there was light, there was love, and love was enough. It had always been enough. The wind moved through oak branches, carrying whispers that might have been voices or might have been memories saying what they'd always said, what they'd always meant. "Let me carry that load. Let me carry that load with you. Let me choose this burden, this moment, this love, for however long we have." And beneath the oak, in soil rich with life and death, and everything between two souls rested together as they'd promised, as they'd chosen. Forever wasn't the point. The choosing was, and they had chosen well.